Abantu! So I hope that woke you guys up. I've just said hello to you in Zulu. Or well, that's what I'll tell you I've said to you in Zulu. Okay, well, thanks very much for having us here today. My name is Stuart McLaughlin. I represent GIA in Sub-Saharan Africa. We're based in South Africa. And my colleague here, Stefan Rosenwell, looks after the northern part of Africa in Tunisia. Okay, so looking at the southern part of Africa, we really focus on the SADC, which is the SADC community, which is really the countries that you can see over here. It's a sort of united trade organization, which is relatively effective, I guess, in terms of looking at sort of a bigger market and spending power and offering sort of bigger markets for companies looking to invest. South Africa is generally seen as really the gateway to Africa. And there's been a lot of questions from other people in terms of, well, how do people get into Africa and what's the route to take? Generally, what you find, most companies would sort of set up an office in South Africa or sort of go through South Africa and then use distributors to go into most of the other regions. South Africa is generally the biggest economy by quite a long way, well within Africa and definitely within the Southern African Development Community. But you see there are sort of a lot of the economies in some of these countries growing at very high rates. Like, for example, Angola, there's massive growth there coming from diamonds, coming from sort of resources in oil and also sort of in other sort of mining areas. And that's sort of growth looking at sort of about almost 20%. So massive growth coming from some of these different areas. Africa's really been awakened now in terms of sort of the massive resource potential, especially when you start looking at companies like China and India, who really are growing at such a rapid rate and they need somewhere to source sort of commodities and sort of product from. Okay, so just a bit sort of characteristics. Yes, it's a much smaller market than sort of some of my colleagues I've spoken about before, but it has grown significantly. You can see from $322 billion to $931 billion in 8 years. And that's continued to growth. Yes, the growth was a bit slower over the last 2 years because of the sort of decline and sort of the global crisis. But what you have found is that a lot of these emerging markets in Africa are not really that affected by the global crisis due to the fact is that, you know, they don't have such a big impact with sort of the banks and sort of the credit crunch, as it were. So if you look at the growth rates, a lot of them are sitting about 4.4 to 7%. So healthy growth, and hopefully that's going to increase. A lot of sort of companies are saying, well, what is the next big thing after you've looked at the BRIC countries? And I definitely think it's Africa. So I definitely think it's something worthwhile looking at because there is quite a big population there. There's a lot of people and it's a young population. So you can see there's a lot of sort of drives towards also business process outsourcing. A lot of the governments are offering a lot of incentives towards business process outsourcing. I know in South Africa it's quite a big drive of ours now to be competitive sort of to some of the other markets. As well as a nice thing is that it's the same time zone. So although it's quite far away, you know, it can work quite well when it comes to outsourcing of processes. In terms of, well, you may say, well, you know, how, you know, Africa seems to be like this big black, dark continent that a lot of you are probably quite anxious about or nervous. But, I mean, there have been quite a few reforms in the last few years to sort of give it some credibility and to stop the unstable. I mean, there's a Worldwide Centre of Commerce looking at emerging market index. Johannesburg ranked sort of 11th in the Southern Hemisphere across all emerging markets. Of the South African cities ranked first for the business environment and ease of starting a business, investor protection, and contract enforcement. So we do have very strong sort of financial services and legal sort of protection for companies looking to come into the country. And it ranks 34 in ease of doing business, according to the World Bank. So yes, there is, I think, opportunity and potential for you. Okay, also a big thing that's just happened is that we now have become part of the BRIC group of companies. So I think in the past, BRIC was just mainly massive economies. And look, let's be honest, South Africa isn't the biggest economy in the world. And it's sort of a lot smaller than the other BRIC countries. But I think it does show the potential that sort of the BRIC countries see in the continent. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in April when they have their first meeting together. Also what we've noticed is, I mean, there has been a massive increase in trade between like China and Africa and India and Africa. I think India, we've just achieved our 2015 target for trade. So there is a lot more investment and awareness of what's happening in Africa. Also, I think we put ourselves on the map by hosting the World Cup in 2010. I think if I'd spoken to you a year ago, most of you have probably never heard of South Africa, or you would have said, well, what country in South Africa? So I think that's created, it's very hard to see, well, what is the business impact, or what is the return on investment that you get from something like the World Cup? But I think the one thing it does do is it creates a lot more awareness for the country, and it also does a lot for the population internally. To coin the phrase from Obama is like, yes, we can. We are a country, we can do things, and we can make it happen in Africa. Okay. Sort of business opportunities. Well, this is sort of from a Harvard Business Review article, which it sort of summarizes opportunities quite nicely. Reliable data show that a number of sub-Saharan nations have emerged from conflict and stable condition, and that new macroeconomic forces are poised to have a profound effect despite the global economic downturn. Our research on African countries indicates that the continent offers competitive manufacturing sites, IT, outsourcing and construction service. There's a real opportunity on the ground in Africa. So I think, yes, the opportunity is there. I think there is potential. And I think the countries that sort of move fastest and move soonest sort of have a very big sort of opportunity there in terms of the size of market. There aren't many sort of companies that have gone in there yet. So I think if you get in there early, then there can be a lot of potential. Okay, just opportunities within South Africa itself. A lot of electricity development. There's a lot of infrastructure being built. So, there's a lot of potential there. There's been a lot of investment from Europe, 33 billion euros over 5 years. As I said, low-cost call center destination. They've just announced that there's about a 20% cost saving on companies wanting to look at business process outsourcing within South Africa, which makes it one of the sort of a really competitive destination compared to sort of some of the other companies. IT in the top 30 software development outsourcing destinations according to Gartner, so a lot of work there. As I said, there's a big population with relatively good education, and it's relatively cheap labor if you compare it to sort of European standards. Increased awareness of green trends. We've just seen a lot of solar sort of technology development, and it's quite a big market for us there. Mining, we're also the world's largest producer of gold and platinum, and across Africa there's a lot of resource that you could tap into, which would probably be quite sort of competitive compared to what you're looking at. Other key sectors: agri-processing, automotive, banking and financial services, sort of the technology and banking financial services within sort of the global top 10. So we've got quite an advanced sort of financial services sector. Chemicals and processing. We've got companies like Sasol, who are sort of the leaders in gas to liquid technology and sort of processing from that. Food and beverage is also a very developed economy. ICT, electronics, mining, tourism and telecoms, so all big opportunities. I think our sort of telecoms is the 4th largest growing sort of cell phone market in the world, growing at about 50% per annum, so it's growing rapidly. And I think that's due, if you look at how the market is broken up, because of the fact sort of your prepaid contracts are very popular, which is also a very big benefit to businesses because there's not much risk. Okay, so GIA capabilities. Our office is based currently in South Africa, but we do have consultants and ability in many of the African countries. We've got industry experience across a number of different sort of sectors: petrochemical, financial services, consumer and retail, engineering, manufacturing, etc. And we've got a lot of expertise from research to consulting within the markets to sort of regular monitoring in various different African languages and opportunity development. Okay, and I think that's it for Southern Africa. So I'm going to hand over to Stefan for Northern Africa, and then we can end off with some questions.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for welcoming us. So I should say hi or bonjour and salam alaikum. So because actually we are, my name is Stefan Rosenwald, and my company is Hervé Conseil, which is Real Value Consulting. And we have 2 offices actually, one in Paris and one in Tunis, from where we help African companies, especially North Africa and West Africa. So I won't speak of France today unless some of you want to discuss of that with me later on. So I will be very happy to. But now I will concentrate on North Africa. Okay, so As you know, sorry about the map, which doesn't come out so well, but the idea of this map was to point out the very nice and interesting geographical situation of North Africa, because it goes basically from Atlantic Ocean on this side, and then on the east it goes up to Asia, and it's a nice entry to Middle East. And then going to the north you have Mediterranean Sea and all the European Union just on the other side, and the south you have a nice entry also to Sub-Saharan Africa. So mainly, basically you have several countries. You have Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya and Egypt. Okay, so it's a quite interesting area because it is actually the main Africa economic region with a total GDP of about 450 more or less billion US dollars, and a GDP per capita of more than 2,000